much. My name is Jean Gugino. I'd like to welcome you all here today. So I am the co-conspirator for the NFWS workshop with your past president, Deb Meyer, who has been indispensable for the things that she has been doing to make our workshop happen and happen wonderfully at the Keenan Center. We have been very excited to present Gary Tucker for you. I'll talk about him in a second. I am sure that you have read his bio, and that's why you're here. But what you didn't know, or what you don't know, is that Gary is a generous, and a gifted teacher. He has been teaching us so many things. We've had 3 days of workshop. We have one more. We've almost exhausted him, not from our questions, but all the things that he has had to do. Judge our show, give a demo, and teach every day from 9:30 to 4. And he talks to people individually and just gives great information. Taught us new ways about thinking about art and how to present your images, how to problem solve. Gary himself has traveled pretty much across the United States. He just came back from a workshop that he gave in Sicily. He's been to Japan many times. He recently went to Honolulu to give a workshop, so he is quite a traveler. He's also been to Japan many times. He has a great love for nature and for the outdoors, and sometimes you can find him in Texas in the desert with his friends of the rattlesnake gang. Or you can find him on the shores of Cape Cod or farther north in New England. He has been working hard here the whole time that he's here. He's going to have one more day, and then he can relax and maybe take himself back to Boston, Massachusetts, where he is currently living. And so we are very, very pleased to present to you tonight Gary Tucker.
It's a great introduction. Thank you, Jean. No. I've known Jean for more than 40 years, and we're good friends. We've done a lot of things together, shows, exhibits, travel, and gotten to know each other as artists as well. So I was really happy when she extended the invitation to come up here and teach and visit her. She left Boston some years ago, and everybody was kind of crying when she left, but she was coming home, and it was nice to see her in her hometown environment. I have to confess, sadly, I am a Patriots fan. Boo! You'll love me by the end of the night, but it's a true thing. Sorry. But I did sympathize with all you fans the other night when Atlanta came to town. I watched the game and I said, "Oh, that's too bad," because I know you've got a good team this year. I know there's a good playoff chance, even a good Super Bowl chance. So I'll be rooting for you guys, unless you're paying the Patriots. Then I don't know. Any case, enough about sports. I'm here to do a watercolor demonstration for you. I'm doing something that's kind of familiar to me. This is probably all the demonstrators that you have. They're going to do something that they've done before. I've done this before. It's a scene of boats. These boats are down on the Chesapeake Bay, and I've been there on several occasions. Sometimes as a plein air painter. They have a huge competition called Easton Plein Air that is in this area, and this is one of the motifs that many of the artists like to paint. This week during class, I've been talking a lot about mood and atmosphere. And it's not like you can go to a color on a tube that says mood or a tube that says atmosphere. It's something mysterious about creating mood and atmosphere. Can you guys hear me okay? Mm-hmm. So mood and atmosphere actually is something that's sort of created through edges and tonal values and all these other things that we use as artists, the result is something like poetry. Poetry is interesting to me, even though I'm really just sort of an amateur. Poetry appeals to me as a visual artist because it's often what's unsaid that connects with us as human beings. And a good poem leaves space for us to enter into it and be surrounded by it and finish it. In essence, we finish the poem. I'm remembering a haiku. You're all familiar with haiku. And I used this as an sort of prologue to a demonstration I gave one time. If you think about someone forecasting snow, snow will be falling at a rate of 1.5 inches per hour over the course of 5 days, over the course of, da-da-da-da-da. A very linear description, describing the snow in detail, describing the amounts, they're talking about snow, but in a very different way. Think about how a poet might describe snow. Snow, cold on the cheek, warm in the heart. This is a haiku that my teacher wrote, and it's always remained with me because, it almost disappears as soon as you say it, but if you repeat it, snow, cold on the cheek, warm in the heart, it's just a huge space that you enter into, right? I'm remembering moments when I was a kid, the snow falling on my cheeks, oh, that's so nice. And the memory that it leaves, of course, is, kind of resounding in my heart. And that's all created by the ability to leave space within the poem for you to enter into. The poet's name is Kajiyasu. He was my teacher for almost 40 years. And Gene's teacher as well. We shared that common teacher. He was a watercolor artist, and one of his strengths was brushwork. And when he often taught Japanese calligraphy alongside watercolor, so that the way a Japanese calligrapher holds the brush is very different than we tend to hold the brush towards the end, almost like we would a pencil, and paint in this fashion. The Japanese calligrapher holds it by the end. And this gives us a little more, it leans towards spontaneity, it leans towards a greater motion, it leans towards gesture. And so I picked that up and I found that it improved my watercolor painting, and it's something that I continue to revisit and think about often. Is the lessons that he gave in calligraphy, the lessons that he gave in watercolor, continue to influence me. Today I'm doing this painting of the Eastern Shore, and I don't know if I can show you the image I'm working from. I want to show it to you because it looks kind of boring. Nothing particularly. Is it upside down? Okay, there we go. And you can't really see the color the way that I can, but you can see that it's a pretty good arrangement of shapes. That's enough for me. I don't need to have every detail. I don't need accuracy with color. What I'd like to see is some interesting shapes that combine. So I took this photo and I played with it a little bit, made it a little longer, zoomed in, these sorts of things. And it started to satisfy me as a composition. One of the things that was important to me is this intersection of the vertical and the horizontal. That's a real point of tension. The fact that it meets near our main boat is just perfect. It's going to allow me to really emphasize this area as my main area of interest. So the way that I would approach this is I would start to think from light to dark, light to dark. It's a very safe way for a watercolor artist to approach a subject, and we like safety. It just gives us a more secure feeling. We can build up to our image gradually. So what I'm thinking to do, I'm thinking of doing this in 2 stages. The first stage, I will look at the top, almost a third of the painting, the sky coming down to the main plank, and the second part is going to be the water, which occupies about 2/3, more or less. And that sort of proportion is really good in painting, sort of asymmetrical, right? Symmetry, not so good for painting. Asymmetry, great for painting because it creates tension, imbalance. Tension is good for painting. It gives it a little life. So those dimensions are satisfied in this composition. Look at the verticals. The verticals are nicely staggered, right? There's a couple through the middle, a nice pylon here, over here, over here, sort of musical in their placement. Those are things that I think about as I'm starting to form a composition, starting to choose a subject. I don't think that I differ that much from most artists, but I do spend time thinking about how I'm going to paint this and why I'm going to paint this before I start to paint this. So I like the mood of this particular image. It's a cloudy day. There's not bright sunlight. There's a quietness to the water. I can look at this and remember that the boats are rocking and I can hear the waves. I like that aspect a lot. So that's something that I think about prior to even picking up the brush. Creating that sense of place, the sense of the experience that I had. Those are things that I'm going to draw upon as I start to paint it. Okay, and talking about painting and painting are two different things. I really benefit as a teacher from talking about painting, to tell you the truth, because I have to describe in words what I'm thinking about, which internally, I don't question it. I don't try to validate it. I think it and I feel it and that's enough. But when I'm trying to express what I'm thinking about or the reason I'm painting this, I have to find the right words. And the right words are important because they give me an angle to the subject, something I can latch onto, something that I can promote. So I hope that makes sense to you. I imagine most of you are watercolor artists and doing the same sort of thing. When you look at your subject, when you consider why you want to paint it, let's think of poetry. Let's think of poetry as we get into this painting. Brush, paint, water. What could be simpler? The watercolor artist has an advantage, as you know. We can go anywhere with this setup and do a painting, and do a beautiful painting, do a museum worthy of painting, just with these simple materials. We don't have to have a lot. But the watercolor artist needs to do certain things that, in a sequence, for them to work, right? We have to think about the underpainting, how it's going to influence future colors. We need to think about our end goal and how our values are going to relate to that. We need to think a lot of things before we start to paint that, in truth, oil painters and acrylic painters don't have to consider as much, because they can adjust more easily. We're kind of, it's there, we have to work with it. So there's a little tension there, and I think that's probably the main reason that more people don't work with watercolor, is it's just an unforgiving media. Now what I want to do is prop up my painting just a little bit. The reason is gravity is another force that the watercolor artist works with. We work with natural forces, water and gravity, sometimes wind. So I'll put this here. I don't need a lot of angle. I just need a little slope for my wash to kind of travel downhill. I'm going to start by painting the sky, basically, that background color. And if you look at my palette, this is left over from a painting I did earlier today. I seldom clean it up. I see a cool color, I see a warm color. I know I need something in between. And I just, many of you know something about cooking And sometimes we take from the soup that's finishing and start a new soup from that soup, and we get unexpected flavors. So people really want to know, how did you get that color? What did you mix for that color? And I'm kind of paralyzed at that moment because I really don't know. I say it's leftovers. Big mop brush. The watercolorist uses, this is one of the most important tools we use, is the brush. And this brush is fantastic because holds a lot of water and still keeps a point. So we need those two strengths in a watercolor brush, the ability to carry a lot of water and to keep a fine point. I'm going to go with a little cooler background. That means a little more blue. And what I'll do is I'll make a mark and I'll watch it. And I can see by this mark that I probably need a little bit more pigment, especially as I come down. So I'll take my time and I'll start to add that. I'll take a little ultramarine blue. A little coolness. Too much. What else does the watercolorist need? We need courage. We need guts. And we need flexibility. We need tolerance. What's that? Patience. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite brand of watercolor?
I favor the Sennelier at the moment. Do you want to know why?
Sure.
So I love the Sennelier colors because if you know the brand, they use a honey as the binder. And what that means for us as watercolor artists is that they dry, well, no, they're more pliable. They don't dry up in the palette as fast. So I feel like I have fresh color at my disposal all the time. And I think that's important because we can spend a lot of time trying to get a thick, rich consistency to our paint. And while we're mixing that color, trying to get that thick, rich consistency, our painting is drying and we've lost the opportunity to do something wet into wet like this, taking advantage of the wet paper. This is another tool that I really love, is my spray bottle. I don't know what I'm going to do when it dies because it just works perfectly in my hands. I tried to find a replacement, one that I can use if this one dies, but I have not been able to find one. It's from a hairdressing salon. The perfect amount of mist. So what I've done here is I brought down a graded wash, it's starting kind of pale and warm at the top, just a little warm. As it comes down, there's a little more cobalt blue washing through here, setting off a transition, a gradation. And yes, there's going to be a lot of busy stuff back here. I've left a few whites here and there. I'm stopping at the top of my main subject, the boat. We know how important the white of the paper is. It's like a treasure, so I tend to leave extra whites here and there. Whether I cover them up at some point, I might do that, but at the moment, I'm going to keep them as they are. So my sky, my first wash, is basically in place. I can now think about how to build up this lower section. I'm going to start in the same manner with sort of a light color. a little more blue in the water, I think, maybe even a little bit of this color, cobalt turquoise. I'll start by painting the hull of this boat just to start the foundation there. I'll go under the pier, leaving a little white along the pier. Onto the right side of the pier, leaving a little white for the top of that pier. And then I'm going to start to carry this down, leaving a few whites here and there. The whites are not drawn in, they just occur. They happen. If I don't want them, I'll paint over them. If they work out, then great. I'm really happy. In the water, I want to do a couple of things. I want to build up the strength, the color, especially under the boat, below the boat, I should say. So you're going to notice that I'm going to start to go a little darker as I move down. This first layer is going to be, very, very pale. I can see it well. I'm not sure. Yeah, you can see it pretty well. Okay. Cobalt blue, this image or this mood is a very kind of cool mood. Overcast day, the water is a little greenish. So as I come down, you'll notice I'm getting progressively darker. Another example of a graded wash. Let's start to build that up a little more. As we come down, down, down. I'm going to switch to my flat brush. Build it up a little more. Getting thicker now. There's that strong gradation. And we'll take this to the bottom, getting stronger as we go down. I think graded washes are one of the most beautiful things in painting, because watercolor is doing its own thing. It's wet, it's mixing the colors in unpredictable ways, giving us variety that we could never paint stroke by stroke. We have to kind of surrender ourselves a little bit to the medium. Carry this up.
What brown are you using?
I'm using burnt sienna. I think I want this to go just a bit higher, because I want there to be a more impressive change here. So if I want stronger color at the bottom, I've got to go stronger. Burnt sienna, cobalt turquoise, good combination. There we go. Work it up like this. Just about to here. So I'm looking, it's going to continue to kind of soften out as it comes down, but I want there to be a definite darkness towards the bottom. This gives the illusion that the painting, this surface, this plane of water is coming towards us. While it's wet, I want to put a few waves in there. And a wave simply means like a stroke of color. These will soften out as well. So I have to make them a little darker than I think they should be. This is another kind of strange part about watercolors. Often we have to make things a little more exaggerated because we know they're going to dry lighter. We know the color's going to spread out. Let's make actually a big one before it dries out here. Okay. So yeah, like a big soft wave coming across here. Another skinny one here. And one more towards the bottom. Then I will dry this off. You can ask any questions.
You stand when you work at home, even in your studio, you stand.
I do, yeah. I just like the freedom of movement. If I'm sitting down, also you notice I keep going like this. Why am I doing that? It doesn't make sense. This is so I can see my painting a little differently and maybe get some feedback that's going to help me. If I'm sitting down, I'm not going to get up. I'm lazy. I'm pretty lazy. I want watercolor to do all the work. I don't want to do too much work. Okay, this is good enough. So then, once I've kind of accomplished that, I will flatten this out. You can kind of see that gradation in the water. You can see the white, you can see the gray of the sky. I don't know if you can perceive the colors that I'm seeing, but there's a warmth behind the blue. This is another magical gift from watercolor. It just mixes the colors in subtle and indescribable ways, very much like we would see a sky. The mixture of colors seems to emulate that which we would see in the sky. So, may I use my hair dryer? Yeah, let's take it off here. Here we go. See, it's the perfect prop, isn't it? All right. So it's basically where I want it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and from an elevation, just dry it off a little bit. Because I want to work with the dry technique after this. This technique is wet into wet for the most part. Beautiful. Look at that color. It's getting better as it dries. If I'm outside and doing this, I just set it under the sun. So this paper is an English paper. It's called Saunders Waterford, and I like it for a couple of reasons. I've used Arches, I've used Fabriano, I've used Bauhung, I've used other papers, Hammermüller, I've used several papers. I come back to this all the time because it's got a little bit of color. This is one of the things I like about it. A little ivory color, a little warmth to it. I know that the plain white or the bright white watercolor papers are too cold, too strong for me. So I prefer this ivory, a little bit of ivory color to it. The sizing in this paper is much less than you find in Arches, even less than you find in Fabriano. So pretty flat. the sizing will create more ridges, and those ridges will stay through the course of the painting in an arches. If I was using arches below, it would remain very, very wavy. This is going to be pretty flat as it dries. And that sort of helps me with the strokes that I'm going to apply later. Also, I like the texture. I use a rough paper. This helps with dry brush if I need some dry technique. Textures like wood or rock or sand or the sort of grainy texture that you see on walls in Tuscany, dry brush is great for that. And it's about the same price. It comes in some unusual sizes, which I like also. This is, I think, 12 by 18, which is a little unusual, but I like the panoramic feel for many subjects. It's a block of paper, yep. So 20 sheets. I can't give you the exact price because I don't remember it, but it's comparable with Arches and Fabriano.
When you say the sizing is less than Arches, is the rough paper in Saunders less rough than Arches and Fabriano?
It's a different type of roughness, but I would say it's about the same roughness as the Arches. The Fabriano is a little smoother than the other papers, even the rough surface. So this is maybe slightly less than the Arches, but enough for me. And it seems to be pattern-based. I don't know why. The Arches seems more random in terms of its texture. And that's one thing I like. That's what I wish that was the case here, but this seems more pattern-based, almost like it was pressed.
And I'm curious about a hair dryer. You may know John Zabovic is dedicated hair dryers. But do you dry with hot air or cool air? Or do you have any other opinions about a warm hair dryer? Some people are opposed to them.
I think the reason that they're opposed is it can move the paint. Yeah, so it can move the paint. Sometimes we want to move the paint, but here the paint had already kind of settled on this line, so I was pretty confident that it would retain that shape. I'm doing it mostly for speed. In the field, I wouldn't do it.
No, I'm curious. When Zabovic thinks it gives the painting a flat, dead look, and I never fully understood that. But I also often wonder whether it's better to dry, or whether you have any opinion about drying with heat or with cool air, whether that does anything different.
I haven't noticed a difference either way. Air drying, natural drying, or cold drying.
I think the Waterford reacts less because it's got that resiliency that if it goes back, that's what I've noticed anyway.
It'd be an interesting experiment to just try that and see. But I haven't noticed degradation or anything like that. Naturally, when it dries, it's going to look a little flat anyway, compared to how it looked when it was wet. I wish we could put like I guess you could put a lacquer on when you finish and get back that wet feeling, because it's pretty gorgeous when it's wet. There's something, you're looking through water, and it's really beautiful. Yeah, there is something unique about it, and once it dries, that's gone, of course, but when it's wet, it kind of enchants us. And sometimes we stop before we should. So you can see the structure, pretty much. This is my plank, this is my main wharf here, my main boat. I've got, if you look at this image, one of the things you're going to notice is there's a lot of busyness in the background. And this sometimes overwhelms us as young artists, as artists that are getting used to painting outdoors. All this stuff, we feel we need to account for it. We don't. This is where that idea of poetry can help us. We can describe things in a simple manner with a pattern. A pattern is a great way to look at a complex area like this, where you see boat after boat and vertical after vertical and flag after flag, and reduce it to, some suggestive shapes that imply boat tops, masts, wires, windows, everything that's there. And I think the danger is to try and put all of that in a photographic manner. So I avoid that danger by using a big brush. Take the Teddy Roosevelt approach. Walk softly, carry a big brush. Okay. This is a pretty big brush. This is a relatively big brush. This is an even bigger brush. Kind of depends on the shape that I want to create. We'll start with the biggest here. Hake brush. This brush is from Korea, but it's got that hake shape. It's using a goat hair, but the binding is very traditional and very, very durable, much more durable than our furled brushes. These brushes, if you're not very careful with them, they'll expand and contract and expand and contract. These allow for expansion and contraction because they're broken down the middle. So air circulates through there. No glue, they're just kind of bound with this wire and sewing, and very, very durable. Lightweight, long handles. You really couldn't ask for much more. The Highlands. Well, this is actually kind of the music I like to listen to in the studio. Where to start? Don't worry, just start. So you'll start to see that I'm making a pattern with this big brush. And I'll continue to vary the color, but I'll try to emulate the value, the darkness. I'm working with the same three colors: burnt sienna, cobalt blue, cobalt turquoise. Let's see how simply we can do this. I wonder if I'm challenging myself to do this with just this brush. It may be impossible.
Do you have buildings drawn back there? I can't see. Are there pencil lines or are you just winging it?
The second. Yeah. This is the fun thing about watercolor. It can be a performance. There's a performance aspect to it. And basically all artists are kind of entertainers at heart. But you hear me breathing hard. It's because I'm concentrating and trying to project what's going to happen, as I apply these colors. Worried that I might fail. I don't know why, because even if I fail, it's okay. I might learn something in the process. But I always want to put on a good show. There's a great artist, teacher, Eric Weingart. Are you familiar with the name? Lives out on the West Coast. He has an exercise for his students to count the strokes they use in their painting. Try 50 strokes. Try 100, even 100 is really very little. But what it does is it eliminates this fussing stuff. So there's a lot of grays here. Some of them are cool, some of them are warm. But they all have that kind of blockish appearance because I've been using this square brush. So I'm going to do a little variation and start to add some rounder marks wherever I see, a little bit of foliage. I'll add now a little bit of green, just a hint of Prussian green. Not a popular green, I tell you. Nobody likes Prussian green. It's a kind of old color. It's got a lot of blue to it. And I just use it because I have it. I'll use hookers, I'll use sap, I'll use Windsor, I'll use anything. Let's make some smaller shapes and start to work in this area a little bit. Start to add different things, break up these bigger shapes in an interesting manner. So that the Highland music is actually helping me when I hear it. I'll give you, a little example. So you. It affects us physically as viewers. We feel when the artist is happy, we feel when the artist is stressed, we feel when the artist is unsure, we feel when the artist is confident directly. We don't even have to think about it. We feel that in the painting. A round shape, so unusual. Let's soften that shape a little bit. See, this is what I can do if I'm not sitting down. Stand up, walk away. If I'm sitting down, I'm much less likely to do that. And when I'm much less likely to do that, I mean everybody is much less likely to do that. So I encourage everybody to kind of stand up. Isn't it interesting how these shapes kind of form themselves and lead you to new shapes, new things? And it becomes really joyful for the artist too, working this way.
I see that the boat is a triangular shape. I noticed you're, using blocky shapes and maybe some rounds. Do you ever stick a triangle in there?
I will right here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And then you'll believe there's more triangles back here, even if you don't see them. Because this will be kind of carried, when we put the mast in, anything that has a vertical is going to kind of be identified as a boat. So we don't have to paint, and most of these boats, in fact, we're looking at the back, so they're kind of squarish. So we do that a lot in painting. What I mean by that is we'll make one boat, very clear, very obvious, very much a boat. And we'll put semi-abstract boats in the midground or in the background. And they don't have to be accurate because the viewer looks at this and understands, oh, those are boats, those are boats. And if they're painted with some flair, it really adds a lot to the painting.
But in your head when you're painting, like when you were doing those backgrounds, are you thinking you're boats, or are you thinking, okay, I'm looking at the painting and I need to do some squares?
I'm thinking, yes, shapes and fun. You probably didn't feel the same sort of fun that I was feeling as putting those on, But when I put on a mark like this, and look how it fades from here to here, that was unintentional, but it's quite beautiful as a mark. When I put in these dots of darker color, they're spreading out and they're creating the illusion of windows or darker parts of the boats, shadowed parts, things like that. So it's, in my mind, starting with shape and then starting to build something that's more fun. Fun sounds trivial, but it's actually very infectious. And I think it's infectious enough that it can sell a painting. Not the reason to have fun, but it's one of the byproducts of having fun.
And you can tell when the stroke is casually fun. You can see that in the stroke.
Yes, you can.
When it's fussed over,
You know why one reason Sargent has the extreme popularity that he does is his confident brushwork. It's like he knows where it goes before he starts his brush. And he may or he may not, but he pretends he does, or he shows us that he does. We understand that. We really love to see that. And he remains one of the greatest painters in modern history. Certainly one of the greatest watercolor artists in history. And I think a lot of that I can attribute to his brushwork. And I've heard the same thing from Japanese artists that I admire. They pick up on his brushwork. So it's universal. Okay, that's about the right tone. Do you see how all these colors, these grays, are very close in tonality? Shapes are differentiating. I've got some roof tops coming forward. I've got some broken edges. I may hide those at some point, but I leave them at this point. What I want to do now is connect some of the masts. And sometimes ergonomics plays a role in our painting. We want to be able to place a stroke comfortably. If I want to place, a long line, I like to rest my hand on the painting and paint it, in that sort of matter, rather than really try to get it going this way. I probably should do it the other way, but I don't. Sorry. This is why I'm tilting the papers, so I have a little better ergonomics. Let's mix up the color, a little more blue.
when you were laying in those first square rectangular shapes, did you have in mind a fishing village? Did you have in mind village? Okay,
Yes.
so you were kind of putting in buildings.
Buildings, parts of boats, rooftops. Yeah. I turn this around, and you start to feel, boats are back there, just by the presence of those masts. You'll notice a couple things that maybe I do a little differently. One is these are kind of broken strokes. They're not continuous. Sometimes it's dark at the end, sometimes it's light at the end, sometimes it's a different color, but they feel painterly. That's one of the reasons I like them, but they're not perfect. That's another reason that I like them. These are just extensions of the background. So I'm dragging color from here upwards. That's plenty for now. I'm happy with the background. I'm not going to do anything more to this background. Well, maybe a little something. Sometimes, the painting's kind of wet right now. Let's put a little spray. I don't know if this will be super effective, but sometimes we'll get little whitish marks as a result. Okay. What's the one rule of performing in front of people? The one rule. Always go out on a high note. So, good evening. Thank you. No, I'm going to continue here. We've got the whole lower section to go, getting into some reflections and darker contrasts. I'm going to start under the pier, start to build the shadow work under the pier, some of the reflections work towards the boat, then carry it to the right-hand side. Put in those verticals, those strong, dark verticals, and finish with a flurry of some interesting reflections. Okay? We need a plan. Cobalt turquoise, switching to a smaller brush. This is a synthetic made by Raphael called the Blue Aqua. I love it for the handle. It's just it feels so good in the hands. Holds a lot of paint, and it's relatively new, so it still keeps a good point. I'm putting a burnt sienna with my cobalt turquoise. I might even put a bit of ultramarine blue to make it darker. But this is how I'm going to start. Pretty thick paint, so now we're getting into some thicker applications. And I'll start by creating this strong edge to the pier. Go a little darker into that. Switch to a pointed brush that has a nice tip to it. It does not hold as much water. Gives me a little more of a darkness to it. These are the Lowell Cornell Ultra Round 7020. They don't make them anymore, sorry. Really?
Cornell, one of them retired, the other one bought the company and named it King Art.
Yes.
So now they're King Art Max Round, and they're awesome brushes.
Yeah. The thing I like about these brushes, the rounds, I think they're called the Ultra Gold something, is they're a little bit longer. But that little bit makes a big difference in how they handle, how they wear, how they apply the paint. So that's all I use for a sablette. Just putting in some darks here. While it's wet, I want these darks to spread out. That's why I'll do it at this point. Build up the color a little bit. Some more of that cobalt turquoise. Cobalt turquoise and burnt sienna are a great team. They really work well. You've heard that phrase, they pair well. That's how I feel about these two colors. They pair very well. Okay. Let's draw some of this up. We have some little things appearing on the wharf, little protrusions, or we have here a line. Make a line with my fingernail. Everything is a tool for me. Define that side of the boat. And I will take just a brush full of water and come to this front edge and just kiss that edge like that. You'll notice that as the paint meets that edge, it's going to soften out on that edge. Let's do the same over here. Kind of working from left to right at this point, top to bottom. some were surprised at how small the palette is. I tend to mix a lot on the paper and less in the palette. So there's my cobalt turquoise, for example. I'll take the burnt sienna, I'll mix it into the cobalt turquoise while it's wet. It's going to bleed into that cobalt turquoise. I'll take some ultramarine blue to darken this. Put some right at the bottom. So I do tend to mix colors on the paper. Other artists do this, but it's one reason that you see I have a small palette. I don't need all that space.
Take that palette with you when you do plein air, is that same palette here?
Same one. You get used to something and I just don't want to change it. I want to keep using it.
And you only have a few brushes.
My goal is to go to a plein air competition someday with one brush, one color, one piece of paper, and win it all. Wouldn't that be fantastic? I would love to do that. So you see me put a mark, and then I step away. I add a mark, and then I step away. This music has such a lonely, lovely feel. I love it. Some of you may know or may not know, but I like to play the accordion. So there's a rich Scottish heritage for the accordion. And one of my favorite fiddlers is Ali Bain. I love Phil Cunningham, who's the accordionist.
Do you play music while you paint?
Yeah. Like this. In the background, yes, a lot.
Button accordion or piano accordion?
Piano accordion. I'd like to learn the button because it's so portable. All right. So that's in place. You notice my pace is slowed down a bit. This is just the nature of painting. I'm going to, when we start to get to our main area and darker areas, we tend to slow down, be more methodical. So these songs we're listening to are working songs, right? Keep the men happy while they're working. Why else would you tolerate an accordion on a ship? Okay. And now the bottom of my boat is very wet. I'm going to carry across some of these darker marks. So I've loaded my brush with burnt sienna. On the bottom, I'm going to get a rich, soft edge there. Burnt sienna, a little bit of ultramarine blue.
Here, I noticed in your bio that you had some calligraphic background.
Japanese calligraphy.
Japanese calligraphy. Do you find
I do, because of the brush, the way they use the brush, the way that the brushes themselves lend themselves to watercolor. This brush is more like a backing brush, but it's still an Asian brush with goat hair. This is definitely a calligraphy brush, and this is using rabbit hair. So, yeah, I use because they have that nice material, and they're durable, and I like the practice of calligraphy. I think it's great for anybody who works with water media. Okay, a little more color here. All of this is bleeding into the boat, which I like. I'm going to do my first reflection coming down, and I'm going to use, bigger brush. Pick up some of this green color and just start to block it in. Now, we do a little work at the edges.
Do you have to still tell yourself, don't go back in over a stroke and leave it, or are you kind of used to that now?
I don't know.
Think about it, I have to go, okay, don't go back over it, one stroke and leave it.
I try. Sometimes, with a new subject, I do naturally go back. Look at these lovely lines here. This is where the real beauty is for me, is how that reflection trails down. Well done, boys.
Was the paper there, did you miss the paper to wet it, or were you on dry paper?
This is all on dry paper right now.
The whole reflection.
Yeah, all the reflection is dry, hard edge, which implies calm water. If it's choppy water, the edge is going to be much more broken. Difficult line here. Some rust. And I think I will paint the mast right now, since I'm focusing on this boat and would like to see it. So I will turn, well, should we do it this way? I'm going to do it this way. Let's put our marks Okay. Oh well, got a little broken there, but I'm not going to adjust it. Okay. Let's put in these pylons. And I want to apply those in sort of a graded fashion. Same colors, just thicker. I'm starting with cobalt turquoise and ultramarine blue. One here. While it's wet, I'll add some brown. About here. Another one, thicker one here.
Are there rules for these reflections?
They should either be lighter or darker than the object, either or. And in terms of size, that would be up to the artist. I like to exaggerate things, so mine are a little longer. Okay, reflections now. So I'm going to use this brush. I think it might be better suited for wider reflections.
I think you grabbed a third color for one of those posts. Did you?
I've been going between turquoise, ultramarine blue, and burnt sienna.
Okay.
But who knows? Sometimes my mind is completely absent. Like hiragana.
Such a beautiful artwork, so elegant.
We are talking about poetry, and the hiragana is actually a poem. It's an alphabet, but at the same time, it's a poem, and it's written by a woman. And it's become a standard alphabet for the Japanese language. I think from the Heian period. We can put a little reflection here. You can do almost anything. But vertical. Vertical says reflection more than probably any other quality. With water, I think one of the things we get confused by is the surface or the reflection. And both are kind of necessary pieces of information. What I'm painting now are mostly reflections. The surface of the water is really indicated by the gradation and the subtle waves that I did early on. It's a great way to spend your evening, isn't it? Dancing, clapping your hands, watching someone paint boats. Talk about poetry, culture. Much better than watching the tube.
You know, those little spaces between, paint the little spaces between the horizontal reflections really pop. You know, just those
These skinny lines, or these spaces between.
spaces between
Yes.
horizontal reflections. They're so important because they just give such life to the painting.
I agree. 100% agree. Well, I'm nearing the end here. Yeah. I don't want to do anything to the background, but I do want to do some. If I had a rigger, I would be putting in those wires. I might have a rigger. Let's see. And a rigger, if you don't know, is a very, very skinny brush. And it's called a rigger because it was designed to paint just those things. I don't know if my brush is capable. I want a really skinny mark, almost like a pencil line. So if I can do it with this, I will. Otherwise, it's something that I would try to do a little later. Yeah, it's just a little wide for my taste. I'll put in one or two so you can see what they might look like. About like that is what I'll do for this part. Are you happy with this? Okay. Ta-da! Any questions about the painting? The second half that was done, you could tell it was a little more rigorous, a little more precise and descriptive, partially because I want these things, these abstract shapes, to make more sense. I think my boat has to make, a lot more sense in terms of its shape and so forth. But it was pretty straightforward from the beginning. I didn't really return to anything. I didn't adjust anything. The strokes I feel good. That's about all I have to say.
Bravo.